against Mr. El Amin. Here's the tax information in the blue box. And it looks like in this case he had about 4 federal tax liens. And in between these boxes it tells you the instrument numbers of those federal tax liens. Red box shows that the property was sold on April 13th, pursuant to the powers given in the deed of trust instrument. And the yellow box shows that it was purchased by Pro Value Properties on April 13th again. And the last sentence here says that the IRS exercised their redemption rights by tendering Pro Value Properties $440,830.80 on June 8th.
So they reimburse.
They reimbursed Pro Value, plus they gave them, I think it was $10,000 on top of it. So if you buy a property at foreclosure and the IRS decides to redeem, they're going to compensate you for it.
What do they do with it from there?
They either hang on to it. This may be a case, just by looking at the name, maybe it's some type of national security issue. They hang on to it maybe for a pending court action that's against that particular person, and they want to use it as evidence, or they want to use it to make their case better when they prosecute.
Just reiterate.
So everything that the buyer just did just went out the window and.
Correct.
But
and he made a $10,000 profit. Yeah. And he probably had to argue like crazy to get that $10,000, saying, I was going to make at least $10,000 on this.
You need to pay $400,000.
Yeah. Here's the red flag. If you're looking at $1 million property and you're going to a trustee sale at $500,000 and there are IRS liens, more than likely that IRS lien is going to come back to bite you. I mean, there's just too much left.
It will happen at the sale, right?
No, the IRS, again, they did it after the fact.
After 120.
And you'll probably start seeing some properties that are either REOs or they were bought by investors, and you'll start seeing in our preliminary title reports there's going to be an exception listed in Schedule B that states that there's a 120-day right of redemption. And of course, before you close, you have to get that removed. And you either have to have that waived or you have to wait till the 120 days expires. Another interesting fact about IRS liens is the 120 days is only good if the IRS was noticed. So if you're working with an inexperienced trustee that forgot to notice the IRS, their redemption is forever. It doesn't ever end.
It's forever?
There's an error.
If they're not noticed, they can come back and redeem the property at any time.
Can you know? I mean,
Yeah,
take a chance and notice.
Well, most of the more popular trustees, they do a pretty good job of it. But there again is just another risk factor that you have to deal with, or we have to deal with, because we for it.
What if you flipped it as an investor, and then in that 120 days, and now the government's coming back, and you don't even own the property anymore, and a new buyer. But the title would never insure it.
Well, we may have insured. We may insure it.
Even with that.
Yeah, we're gonna most of the time we're gonna make certain assumptions with dealing with these real estate transactions. One of them is going to be that there was proper notice given to everybody that was subject to a foreclosure. Not always, but most of the time that's going to be our position.
Hey, my question, I guess, is for everybody, for you guys. What is our position on auction properties selling within the 120 days?
We're going to require. We're going to require.
Are we case by case?
No, we're going to require a waiver, or the 120 days expires.
Okay.
Now, granted, this document I'm sharing with you is pretty rare. This is, I think, the only one I've ever seen. And I think the only reason I knew about this is because I used to work with Pro Value as one of my customers. And they kind of freaked out a little bit when they got the call from the IRS saying, "Hey, your sale's it's coming to us."
What about the ability to challenge at an auction the buyer coming back? Isn't there?
You mean the IRS?
No, from a title, isn't there still a little bit of concern at an auction that the buyer still, it's not been proven to us that a buyer was properly notified and all that?
You mean the seller, or like the person who was foreclosed?
The owner, yeah, the prior owner. And that they may come back and sue to try and get the property back after the fact.
We would only worry about that if there was some type of hole in the recording documents.
Okay. Isn't that what happened in the case up in Sacramento? The legislator that the property was foreclosed on, sold to an investor, and somehow they decided invalidated it, and the legislator went from, was it San Pedro or Long Beach, whatever, got it back. Remember reading about that?
They just didn't like the bad PR.
Yeah. So the investor that bought the thing at auction was just SOL, huh? He got his money back, but he put a lot of improvements
Well,
into it in
that's
the
what
meantime.
they were able to negotiate at least 10 grand for their time and effort, right?
Stay away from this.
Yeah. And who grants the waiver? Who is giving the waiver?
The IRS gives away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, so how does that relate to what you were saying, that the IRS would release it and
This would be like if you're in a short pay situation.
Oh, going,
They-
okay.
Yeah, this is after a foreclosure.
This-
What
yeah.
Ray was discussing is if you were dealing with a
Sure.
short.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
Or
essentially
a
the same thing. I mean, the problem here when you're arguing with the IRS is obviously there's some upside because somebody came in and bought it and saw the upside potential. On a short pay, there is no upside because the lenders aren't getting satisfied. So the IRS is a little bit more willing to release those, you know, in a little bit more timely fashion. Where they're going to want to look at it. I mean, you know, if they can get some of their money, they're going to try and get some of their money back.
Is the same thing true of California, or do they have a different wrinkle?
Of California?
California.
The state of California?
State
State of
tax.
California.
No, they're wiped out.
They're wiped
They
out.
don't have redemption rights.
Okay.
Only the IRS does.
Oh, only the IRS. So they're primarily after trustee sale. If you're the purchaser, that's the biggest worry.
Well, if there was an IRS lien. This is only a concern if an IRS lien was wiped out in foreclosure. So a junior IRS lien.
The IRS lien would have to exist, not just
Correct.
Right.
the fact
It's just
you
not
hadn't
the
paid
fact that he
taxes, you
owes.
had to have a
Right.
lien, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just somebody owes money and they come back and take the property.
Now, again, remember, if you're having me run a general index search and it's Tim Smith, it's going to be
Yeah.
really hard for me to say yay or nay, that's our Tim Smith on this property. That type of a name.
Because you're running a name and not a social.
Well, if you have the social, that's
Right,
great.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
but you know, if you're dealing with a distressed property, unless it's
Probably
your
have to get
seller,
social.
it's going to be hard for you to get a social security number.
And all we have to work with is the name and the address.
So if I have a social, you can pretty much guarantee you we will find if there are liens
Already.
with the social and the full name, we're gonna pretty much find it. And if we don't, we beat up Mike.
Or if you find a lien against a guy named Mike Merlo, it's probably me.
Basic question. When
Sure.
you're saying purchasing at whatever 400 and some thousand, this is an all cash deal? Then there's
When you
no,
purchase out of foreclosure, yes.
so there's no lender involved at
No.
all
You have to show up with
with the cashier.
cashier
Checks.
checks. And typically the bidders will come with different denomination of cashier checks to, equal whatever they're buying.
And one of the things too, again, when you look at the trustee sale notice, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They're going to tell you if you call in, minimum bet is set at this amount, and they may even give you a bid increment of, it's $5,000, $10,000, depending too on, if you're looking at a $900,000 trustee, they're going to probably set it at a higher bid increment than if you're looking at a $200,000 trustee.
So they set the bid increments.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's why it's guesswork on your part if they don't set it. You're kind of at the mercy of showing up
Why are
there.
they making it so hard at the end?
That's why there's these professionals. That's why there's Wedgwood
I know.
properties that they pretty much are going to get the properties they want to get because one, the auctioneers know them and they know they know what they're doing, and two, they have an advantage over an individual trying to get it. Not that you couldn't. It's just
They'll
very,
set you up
very
too.
hard.
I've been there. You come
Oh, yeah.
by yourself, they'll just set you up.
Yep.
It's like being a stranger at a poker table almost.
Bring a lot of cell phones and pretend like you're talking to people.
And they do. They'll call moments before the sale takes place and just re-verify. Are you sure there's only this many taxes owed? Are you sure this is the deed of trust that's going to sale? And on the flip side of this is what a release and waiver looks like. Certificate of release of right of redemption. Top part there, it'll mention the taxpayer's name and their address. Right here, it lists the different federal tax liens that total $2.1 million. And right here is the provision in which they are determining that the property is not worth enough to satisfy their liens and they're waiving their redemption right. It's kind of a bad copy, but it's a little old, from '06. So that would be the document that you would try to get a hold of if you found that there was an IRS lien, that there's a 120-day right of redemption.